And there goes the record button. All right, I will share. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my desktop at this point. And we have a rolling agenda. And the items for this agenda, relatively small meeting. Hopefully it'll go quickly. As always, also the chat for this meeting is used for notes. So if you have an item you want to add, please use the item in the topic and it will automatically be added to the notes. All right, given that, action item review. So scroll down so I can see the minutes from the last meeting. There were only 3 action items. 1 was for me, 2 were for everyone. In terms of the action item for 1.x features and what their process is going forward, I'll be honest, I've talked to some people, haven't talked to all the people I want to talk to. At this point, it looks like bug fixes will continue to go to the 1.x branch, but we're trying to limit new features, so I don't think any new features are being added. There is an outstanding feature that wants to go into the 2.x branch, but we're going to hopefully be able to hold that off. That's the multi-tcont. Hold that off until after we branch the 2.x tree for a stabilization branch. Turns out the other 2 action items, people have been adding JIRAs as well as people have been identifying patch sets in the chat log, and I've been trying to capture some of those and make sure those are tracked as best I can. I know this list isn't up to date. I was not on the chat yesterday, so I will have to catch up on those chats, or catch up on which outstanding patch sets and JIRA items are still outstanding until we can get to the branch. There's been a lot of focus this past week on getting a repeatable process with Volta 2.x so that we have a consistent BB-SIM test, as well as Matt's been working on getting a consistent hardware test. So that's been great. I just need to catch up a little bit on the formalization of the patch sets and the JIRAs to catch up on that. Any questions on that?
Actually, I do have a lot of questions regarding the new features being merged into the whatever the branch we're using. Are we going to use a separate branch for the stabilization?
Yes. So once we get all the patch sets we believe are required for the 2.x stabilization, what we call 2.x stabilization, that minimal set of features, then we will be creating a separate branch where we will focus on stabilization. Once that branch has been cut, then new features may be continued to be added into the 2.x master, essentially. And at that point, there will be a requirement to do double edits, so that if there is a bug fix in the stabilization branch that applies to the master branch, that bug fix will have to be cherry-picked into the master. Additionally, if during the development of master something is done in master that is relevant in terms of stabilization, not new features, to the stabilization branch, it will have to be cherry-picked the other way. So it is going to increase the complexity of the development until we get to a place where the stabilization branch is stable, and as well as the kind of all the stabilization fixes are additionally in the master branch as well. One thing we want to ensure going forward, even after we get stable, is that features are not added even to the master branch in some sense until they passed some criteria for stabilization. In other words, we want to um, somehow lessen the Wild Westness feel of some of this and get to the point where code that is checked in and committed into master has gone through sufficient testing, automated testing, that we don't have to create another stabilization brigade because we want the master just to be more stable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Though I have still lots of questions on this one. I understand the generic or general goals of this thing, but like when you talk about the 2.x master, are we talking about the real master, or are we talking about the 2.0 release that we had, I don't know, a few weeks ago?
No, so we're not talking about 2.0. We're talking, so right now all the changes for the stabilization brigade are being made in master, and that will continue
Okay.
until we get to the patch sets we require to hit our minimal feature set. So basically, till we're waiting to get code complete is almost the way I think about it. And at that point, we will branch and have our stabilization branch. So this is really not 2.0 we're stabilizing. This is really more along the lines of 2.1 we're stabilizing.
Okay. So when you're talking about the patch sets that's identified as the minimum feature set, it's the feature set that we need to add to mainline before we finalize everything on the mainline and say, okay, there's no more new features coming in.
Correct.
The reason I just asking this question is we started having this conversation last week actually with another brigade regarding BAL 3.1. There is changes in BAL 3.1 that needs to be committed to somewhere, and we've been testing it only on 1.7. And BAL 3.1 changes are fairly large. Do we want those changes in, for example, or there's in-band management coming into BAL 3.x? Do we want those in? I mean, how do we maintain all these new features that somebody says it needs to be in?
At this point,
what's the customer feedback on this?
So at this point, we in terms of stabilization, what I call 2.x or 2.1, we had said we're gonna focus on BAL 2.6 and not the newer BAL. At least if my memory serves. If someone else has a different recollection, please speak up. So no, I don't think we want the new BAL updates in 2.x, nor do I want them in the 1.7 tree. At some point, we have to say, look, I understand customers want certain things, but we have to pause and get this stuff stable, or it doesn't sets are, because it's not going to be in a deployable state. If we can push forward, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better.
No, I agree. But during that meeting we had, I think people from, I don't know if Dutch Telecom was there, but Turkish Telecom was there. And I understand the roadmaps very much in line to each other. They want BAL 3.1. So we have a goal that says, okay, we want to go ahead and have a stable branch, and we don't even want BAL 3.1 in the 1.7. But at the same time, Turkish Telecom and maybe even the Dutch Telecom, they want these features in the whatever the stable branch is. So are we driving or these feature set requirements, or are we going to be getting some feedback? I think we should get some feedback from these end users actually.
So the carriers and providers drive the feature set. Absolutely agree with that. But the issue, and my issue is, look, we're going to get those features implemented. But if we don't get the foundation of this right and stable, those new features don't matter. I know Bjorn's on the call from Deutsche Telekom. I don't know if he can comment on specifically in the BAL or not. Bjorn?
It's not just BAL. I mean, in general, who drives the feature sets included in the whatever the stable branch is? I mean, we may have we may have a very stable branch that works beautifully, except that Like the vendors don't like it because they don't have this feature or that feature, so they are not going to use it. So who owns the features that we include in the stable branch? I mean, I understand. Of course, we have to go ahead and draw the line.
The carriers do provide input into, as everybody else in the community does, provide input into the feature sets in the stable branch. I'll be honest, part of the brigade is to help guide that to say, look, here's what we think we can get in and get stable. And the carriers actually did express an interest even going beyond what we originally thought in the stabilization branch. So originally in the stabilization branch, we weren't going to do the tech profiles. The carriers expressed an opinion that they wanted the tech profiles in, so they got in. But if we continue to stretch what's in the stabilization branch till we get to, then we won't have a stabilization branch. We will have what we have today. So I'm not disagreeing that the carriers provide the feature sets. What I'm talking about is really the timeline to introduce those feature sets. And if we continue to say, I mean, I'm using ballot as an example. If we say, okay, they wanted, the carriers wanted tech profiles. We put tech profiles in, great. Oh, the carriers want the BAL 3.0. Okay, we'll put BAL 3.0 in, great. The minute we've decided we want BAL 3.0 in, something else is going to come up, right? It's not that new things aren't available, but at some point, if there isn't a pushback that says yes, BAL 3.0 will be in Volta at some point, but we need to stabilize first. If there's no pushback, we might as well not have a stabilization brigade because, I'm sorry, you're not going to get stable.
Yeah, that's true, but I think my opinion is a little bit different from yours. If the carriers agree on the fact that the schedule is going to be such and such because they need to have this feature, and if they don't have this feature, DT Telecom or Turkish Telecom or AT&T is not going to be able to use this stable Volta branch. What's the point on having a stable Volta branch if carriers are not using? So I think we need to go ahead and come up with the feature list that all three carriers agree.
So we've
we came up with that feature list. We came up with that feature list. It was in the notes. It's been in the past meetings. And that feature list did not, as my memory serves, and if my memory is wrong, please someone speak up. But we came up with the feature list which said tech profiles, but BAL 2.6. If we're looking to change that feature list, that is a big deal to me.
So this is Saurav, and we've had this discussion many, many times now, and we need to end this. The decision has already been taken on what that feature list is for the stabilization branch. Please try to understand that this is not, it doesn't mean that whatever happens in the stabilization branch is it, we're done. This, and no new features are going to be included in the stabilization branch for the, till the end of eternity. That's not the purpose, okay? New features could go into master.
I would say no new features are going to be added to Volta to the end of eternity.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Stabilization branch is supposed to be
not supposed
temporary thing.
Stabilization brigade is not supposed to last forever, right?
Yes.
It's supposed to stabilize the current base of Volta, and it's going to establish a process by which future features are going to follow that process into get. That's it. That's all we're trying to say.
Okay, good point. But Sarah, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to argue with you on the fact that we need to go down put some rules on this into this madness. But at the same time, do you guys have explicit agreement from Dutch Telecom, Turkish Telecom, AT&T, saying that yes, we understand this is the only one feature. These are the only features that's included in this stabilization branch. If they agree, by all means. If they don't agree, if they are still grumbling, I think we have a problem. I don't think that we can make that decision. I think we need to go and get their agreement.
No, I'm sorry. It is not. No, I'm sorry. It is not a decision of the operators of. It is not completely up to the operators to decide what's going on in the stabilization branch. Right? It's
Okay,
just
let me ask another
the
question
gates of
then. And maybe you're right. But what if they come back and say, you know what, you guys have a stabilization branch. I don't care. It doesn't have the features that I need. I'm going to go ahead and have my own branch, and I'm going to start the version from you guys.
well, that'll be
So we
unfortunate,
can
but that
include as many activities in the main line going forward. But if the operators or the carriers come back and say, you know what, you guys are too much theoretical. You guys have all these features that we don't care. We want to have our own branch, and we are hiring our own people. We are going to have our own releases.
yeah, well,
The
that
reason
will
I'm
be
bringing this up
unfortunate.
is
That
the
Taskin, I
reason the
understand what you're
reason.
saying. Taskin, can I say something, please? It'll be unfortunate if the
Okay,
carriers
let me finish
decide to
if
do
you don't
that.
mind. Let me finish if you don't mind. Let me finish if you don't mind. We had this issue with Sonic. We had some big vendors like Alibaba. They decided to go ahead and have their own branch. Now they have their very stable own branch, and then they maintain, and they don't really commit those changes back into the main line. So they are maintaining their own things.
Yes. So,
And we may end up something like that. We'll have a product that nobody uses, and Alibaba's and Dutch Telecoms and Turkish Telecoms have their own branch.
can I speak something now?
I'm hoping to avoid that.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So thank you. So yes, it'll be unfortunate if the carriers decide to have their own product branches or their own versions of Volta. But for the good of the open source project, for the good of this work, okay, the Stabilization Brigade has decided on something, and we need to move forward with that. Okay.
There's input from the operators into that, at least some of them.
Yes.
Did Turk Telecom explicitly bless it? I can't say yes or no to that.
If I could add here a little bit, so the feature list that was proposed, put forward from Deutsche Telekom's side, was compiled off the back of the feature set that was agreed in the Volta lockdown earlier this year. It is 95% comprised of the items that were in there, and there's a couple of other items that are relevant for Turkish Telecom and AT&T, from what I believe. So, from that perspective, we think that risk is it is a valid risk, but we believe it is mitigated by the fact that it's a version of that list which 95% resembles what had been agreed by all the operators in the lockdown.
Okay, so maybe we should just go ahead and make it 100%. If you guys think that it's not needed, I'm okay. We'll go with the stabilization branch. But I think if the gap is only 5%, maybe we should talk to them and try to get an agreement from them. I understand this cannot continue
I'll be
forever.
honest. I'll be honest. I do not want to reopen the feature set discussion again. If we keep reopening it, and as Sarav said, we've done this in the past 2 or 3 meetings. If we keep reopening it, we're never going to close it. At some point, lines drawn and we move on. I'm sorry if Turk Telecom hasn't felt they've been able to participate in those discussions in the early meeting. And if they want to, have them call me and we'll talk one-on-one. But I do not want to use this meeting for a continuation of the discussion of the feature sets. We've got to use this meeting in a way to move forward.
Agreed. We do need to move forward. We still have quite a bit of work ahead of us, and we've agreed on that feature set. Let's carry on. If some minor changes of functionality needed to be added, that could always be discussed at a later stage, but let's take this as a basis right now, as a stick in the ground, and work from that.
Okay.
I agree. Thanks for the input. And again, if Turk Telecom wants to talk, let's set up a meeting and I'll talk. I just don't want to use this form for that. All right. Any other comments? I didn't take great notes. Sorry. I'll try to do it after the fact. If other people have comments, please just do an add item and add them. So going to patch set updates. I said I had some patch sets here that I've been tracking last week partially. I have not kept up to date with all of them. Are there any patch sets that people want to call out? Or has the status of any of the ones that I've got here on the agenda been changed? In particular, you have like the 1623, the ones that have got marked pending, have they been merged? And more importantly, does anybody have information on the status of the tech profile patch set?
Yeah, this is Amit. So, yeah, on 1623, they are doing some load testing. And I think after we have the output of those tests, I think we would be in a better to to again talk to the core guys and see if we can merge it.
Okay.
So it's in progress. The load testing is in progress.
Okay. You said load testing, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and that's using the IT framework.
Okay. Any other comments on the patch sets then, or a patch set that people want to bring up to talk about? All right. Moving on to the topic of testing. Kailash has been working on end-to-end tests, and I really appreciate that. So, you need to. I assume you're gonna show some stuff. So, should we hand over the sharing to you?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Let me stop my share.
Okay.
Are you able to share? Excellent.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So yeah, as David mentioned, I've been working on some automated tests for Volta 2.0, and these tests, I've been basing these tests off of a kind Volta deployment on a minimal set. So the environment is an environment that a developer can use while they're developing, and then they can test it as well too. That's the idea here. I started with that. Now, this is not the complete test suite or the complete test cases that we ideally need to run as a part of this Brigade. It's rather just a starting point because everyone can get kind Volta deployed and everyone can get BBSIM deployed all in a virtual environment and get some end-to-end tests running. So what I want to show here today is the test suite that I have written, and I'll kind of go over the test cases. And then I'll talk about where I'm running them right now and what the plan is moving forward on where and how we want to run these tests, how we want to do patch sub verifications, and how we want to track issues moving forward so that we minimize bugs going into the stabilization branch and master as well. So this test suite right here, I have, I wrote this job and I've been running it over the last couple of days, mainly since yesterday evening actually, because I finally got the job kind of stable and everything configured properly. It's running on an EC2 instance. You guys can take a look at the pipeline in this job as well too to see how I deployed and how I'm configuring this environment. So I'll talk about the test case here. So this is a robot test log. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but in each of the test cases and the test suite itself too, there's some documentation here that I'll describe what the test suite is doing. And I called this the sanity test suite, and that's the only test suite that I have written so far. But it creates one BBSIM, OLT, and ONU, and the test validates that the ONU comes up and can get activated, and EAPL flows get pushed down, authentication succeeds, and then also DHCP goes through. And then I added a test case just yesterday to delete these devices and validate that the deletion of the devices goes through. So let me kind of go over the test cases over here. First test case. And also I should mention these test cases are using Bolt CTL as the utility tool to kind of orchestrate things and provision devices, enable them. And yeah, so right here, there's a test case here that activates the BBSIM ONU. That passes. And so when it activates it, we validate that the state of the OLT and ONU become enabled, active, and reachable. Then we go into ONAS. Let me mention this as well too. So in a you need to also deploy ONAS And so in the kind Volta script to bring this up, obviously you guys know ONAS comes up as well too. And so you can't really test Volta without ONAS, and in this environment as well too without BBSIM. But obviously there's so many other deployments, and a full environment would involve physical devices, and we need to get there at some point as well too. So this one involves ONAS, Volta, and BBSIM. So then the second test case will validate that the OLT device gets connected to ONAS. So the test suite itself, actually, I created a module that will SSH into ONAS. Well, this command actually does a REST call to ONAS to check the devices and validates that the device gets connected to ONAS. And then the next one is that we validate that ONAS, that the ONU gets authenticated in ONAS. So we go into ONAS, we do a AAA users, we make sure that the user gets authorized. And in this test case, I've been seeing some inconsistency in my test results. So this test case actually failed, but you can see what this test case is doing is that after the IP flows are pushed to the device, BBSIM will start DH client for the ONU, and DH client should go through. And in this case right here, so you guys can see I'm doing DHCP-L2 relay allocations and waiting for DHC pack to appear for that ONU. This test case failed. And yeah, so that's something I need to debug, drill down, see where we can stabilize on that, see if there's a bug out of that. That's what I would be doing as these test results come about. And then right here at the end, we delete the device and verify that it's completely removed from Volta. There's actually a bug, Jira open for this, which is why I added this test case. So, you know, we disable the ONU, we delete it, we make sure that it's removed, and Volta doesn't see it anymore. And then the OLT, we do the same. However, in the OLT's case, it stays appeared as the logical device reference does not get deleted from Volta. So that's a bug. There's a Jira open for that. And so, you know, we can do things like we can leverage test tags here so that if there's a Jira open for it, we can add that Jira as the name of the test tag, and we can ignore that if it fails until the Jira is closed. You know, there's many things we can do with that, but again, this is a regression bug. So any regression test cases that we write or that we should be writing, they should be running as a part of the sanity test suite. So ignoring the failures for right now, I kind of want to go back and show also the job here. You can see the graph here. So I've been running, this is build number 62, but there's only the last 20 builds or so have been relevant because that's when I got this job stable and running. And as you can see here, I only have 5 test cases. But here you guys can see there's some inconsistency. Sometimes 3 test cases fail, sometimes two, most of the time 2 test cases fail. A couple times we've seen 4 test cases out of 5 test cases pass. So
is there a way to tell if the test cases that have consistently passed are the same test cases via graph, or I mean, or is it just drilling down, right? Because if when I look at that graph, I see 2 test cases are relatively consistently passing. I'm assuming those are the same 2 test cases, but there's no way to be sure.
That's correct. So if you go to each job number, this is job number 62. This is the robot plugin for Jenkins. And so you see the failed test cases here. They have an age here. So that means delete, device, and verify, which is the Jira I talked about. That's been failing 33 times consistently. The DHCP assignment actually has been failing 13 times. And so that's to the extent of how you can see which tests failed. If you want to do some more analysis, you'll probably have to go into the log itself and kind of track it down yourself. Or we can go to build 61 and then view the results there. You'll see here 32 and 12. So yeah, I mean, from this page, you should get a good idea of what's been failing and if it's consistent or not. Obviously, if a new test case came here and failed and you have a number 1 on it, you should probably look at that first. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And in addition to that as well, the job also does some good stuff here where it archives the logs. So archives all the pod logs for this deployment. So when you're debugging, you have all the relevant logs for you there. So if you look at the test results and you see that, okay, let's say authentication failed for the ONU, and if you kind of have an idea of how things are working or where the bug might be, then it'll give you a good point in, I should look at the core logs first, or I need to look at the adapter logs. Or if you think the errors in BBSIM and everything from ONA's side, everything was looking good. So then you have BBSIM logs to look at as well too. So this job should be very helpful in determining where the point of failure is. So I think this will help a lot moving forward. Now I kind of want to talk also about this job and where we plan on running it and how we plan on running it. So currently I set up that job and it's simply just running on the released charts that we have in Volta 2.0. So as you guys know, Volta Core is pinned to Volta 2.0 version. I am going to today create a separate job that's going to run all these tests on the latest versions. And I'm doing that right now because we haven't branched yet. Now, when we branch, it's important that we capture the versions that we branch to and we get these tests running on those versions. And then also getting these tests to run per each patch set. It's a little tricky at this point because I know there's a lot of folks that are doing a lot of work with BBSIM to get BBSIM consistently working. So once we get there and once I believe Matt is doing the testing with the physical devices as well too, once we get to a point where we're confident in branching, and I think that's also very heavily dependent on the pending patch sets, I will set up these jobs and I will set up these tests to run on patch sets, and we can discuss on what we will allow the which test cases to fail. If they're test cases that are known issues that are currently have JIRAs open for them and being worked on, then we can allow that test to fail and allow that patch to get verified. But for right now, all I have is it's just running on release chart versions. It's not as meaningful to us right now in the work we're doing right now, but once we branch, we need to get these jobs in place so that we don't regress issues.
Yeah, I think it will be very useful to also periodically run this test on the hardware. Of course, we cannot run patch set gating on the hardware, but running a nightly build on a real OLT would be very good.
Yeah, and so the equivalent of this scenario on a physical hardware as well too. That way we have that certain level of validation for the core, right? So yeah, I have plans to also start writing physical test suites. So I'm not sure if you guys have seen this repo. We just recently created this repo, and all it has a test framework here, and it kind of describes how I'm planning on writing these test cases, and where you should put them, and where we can leverage common functions and keywords for this test framework. There is one action item I am still planning on doing is containerizing these tests. That way, developers can run them in their local environment, and the same test that will be run as a patch set you can run it locally before sending it up for review. So that's another action item that I think will help out too with this developer loop. So yeah, so I just actually started this document here. I need to really refine this and put more details in here. Kind of things that I mentioned in terms of we should run these tests also periodically against the latest chart versions as well too. In addition to bringing up a physical test pod suite with physical devices and testing things in traffic as well too at a sanity level. I think we need to start with that, and then as we gain some stability, then we can start adding feature test cases, and then we can decide from there how often do we want to run these feature test suites. Do we want to gate them on patch sets, or do we want to run them nightly? Kind of what we do in SIBA is the full test suite and feature test cases we run nightly, and for patch sets we run a minimal set of test cases that test against SIBA in a box, and we just make sure nothing fundamentally has broken. So we can kind of use that approach here. I need to refine this document to put all those details and capture all that information here. But that's my plan with testing, not just specifically in this stabilization branch, but we're going to start here, and we need to replicate the same in master. They can be different test results, but eventually I think the end goal here is for both branches to be stable. It's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but that's where we have to get.
So Kailash, for these tests, how long do they take? I'm asking mainly in the interest of gating patch sets.
Yeah, so the test run itself actually does not take that long. I think the test itself right here, the total test suite run took 4 minutes, but this is because some of the test cases failed. So all these test cases use a polling mechanism, and so timeouts were hit here, generous timeouts. So if in a happy test environment, it would probably take 3.5 minutes. Obviously, the more number of test cases you add, it'll increase. But the main thing here is the deployment of the system, right? End to end, this whole job took about 12 minutes, which is not bad, right? Do you agree?
That's 5 tests, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I agree that the bulk of the time is going to be system setup. Do you tear down and build up Kubernetes each time, for example?
Not so. Kubernetes is installed. Well, Minikube is installed inside these EC2 instances. The bulk of the time actually comes from downloading the containers. Yeah, that's where the bulk of the time goes.
And there's not really much that can be done.
Yeah, and because these are running on a EC2 instance, I mean, we do have nodes that we can plug in here, but most of us use those for development purposes, and I want to run the sanity test cases on EC2 instances just because it's another node that we don't have to manage, right? It's nothing. If we have a failure, we don't have to worry about, is there an issue with the node? If is there some packages missing on that node? So that's the idea here. I want to continue to use an EC2 instance here.
Okay.
Yeah. And we don't tear down because after this job completes, that node goes away anyways, once we capture all the logs.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that in most of the cases, you're using VBSIM anyway. So like the setup and tear down is going to be not that costly. If we start using, when we start using real hardware for testing, that setup time is going to take considerable amount of time.
Oh, can you repeat that? I didn't follow.
When we start using the physical devices, like the real switches, the setup time is going to take considerable amount of time. You need to go and upload the image to the devices, like reboot them, configure them, and then run the test case.
Yeah.
Or are you? I think that's how your test is set up right now. That you reinitialize pretty much everything on the target, which is VBSIM. We'll have a little bit of scalability issue when we start using the physical devices with the separate. But we need to go and figure out which tests affect each other.
Yeah,
maybe
that's
we can
correct.
just do that. Avoid some reboot.
Yeah, and if the physical test setup and test suite is running on just a nightly basis or not on each patch set, then we don't care if it takes 30 minutes or an hour, as long as we get meaningful results.
Just to give you an example again from Sonic, if you run all Sonic test cases, uploading image and rebooting the devices back to back, a single test bed takes about, 49 hours. Because of that upload and reboot cycle in between each test cases. So it's we're talking about like 30 minutes.
That's including,
and that's
you said image update, like image update to the physical devices? You're talking that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's hundreds of test cases. I'm assuming that like this 5 is a small number. When we get to a point where we're running, 300-400 test cases, it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I don't think we see that kind of test scenario in our near future plan. So it's obviously a meaningful test. It's something that we should do as this project goes on. But again, I would see a scenario like this, at least we would probably be doing things like this right before release times, and it might be like a one-time thing. So I don't think we need to stress too much about creating a job for a scenario like this and running this type of scenario frequently. We need to start with the basis of sanity, functionality, scale, stress, yeah, so all of that stuff. But good point as well. It's something I think that would be critical, obviously, before each release time.
Mm-hmm. No, so at this point, the number of tests we have is just too small anyways. Mm-hmm. Over time, it's going to increase. Then we'll deal with that issue when we can come to that point. But I think I'm assuming it's going to take another year or so.
Yeah,
to get to a few hundred tests.
And even, I mean, I wouldn't stress too much about the number of test cases increasing per, patch sets or nightly when we run and stuff, because, over time, as we stabilize more and more features and stabilize the project, we can also come back to the test and decide, okay, well, these features have been reliably tested and passing for a while. If we want to minimize these test cases, we can group them together, or we can take some of them out for the patch set verification. If we want to put a hard limit on, let's say, patch set verification should not take more than 15 minutes. So then we can come back to these tests and revisit on, which test cases we can actually take out of the sanity test suite and just throw them in the nightly test run. So there's
how can people contribute test cases?
As soon as they have an environment up, and as soon as we identify more test cases to run. So I need to also, I know we have that initial document with the Excel spreadsheet of the number of test cases. So I will also take an action item to update that to reflect what test cases have been done and what test cases still need to be done. And so people can refer to that, and then also they can look at the Volta system test cases repo. I have some documentation there on how to get the test environment set up and how to contribute to test cases. And it would be a good time if people are looking to contribute to tests. It'd be a good time to start looking at them right now, while things are still fairly easy to bring up and test. I mean, I don't want people to get lost into the test framework so much. I'll do my best job to make sure everything's structured. Right now it just started, but yeah, if anyone's looking to start contributing test cases, take a look at the Excel spreadsheet, reach out to me, and I can help you guys get set up and running.
Excellent, thank you.
So also, one more question. Once we are contributing changes, bug fixes, should we have a drastic rule in the stabilization branch that says, if you are fixing a bug, you have to contribute a test case about that? Like, so if there's no test case, you cannot contribute. So that this will help us with the increased number of test cases.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you've regressed a bug or introduced a bug, when you send your patch in to fix it, you should also contribute to a test. And writing these test cases, they're not that hard. Robot framework, if people haven't worked with it before too, I'm trying my best to really write generic keywords and libraries in Robot so people can utilize. People can easily write their own test cases too when they're working on a feature or if they're fixing a bug. So this is just this. I have this library here that has various utilities for the system here, and you can easily read this keyword, which is a function. Read the documentation. You should be able. That should be enough for you to contribute a line of code in the test code and start writing your own test case. So yeah, but again, if that would be ideal if people can, as they're working on features or if they have regressed issues and are fixing bugs, if they can contribute tests along with their fix, that would be great. Or even to start with, if you can identify the test scenario or test case that would need to verify that patch set, we can, from our testing team, we can get someone to write that, automate that test case, and then we can get that pushed and verified kind of along the same time. That would be ideal and really great if we can start doing that.
I think we should have a rule that says if you're fixing a bug, if you're fixing a regression, you have to have an automatable test. Otherwise, you cannot put the code in. I know it's going to increase the number of days time we need to take to fix the bug, but I think we need to go ahead and add more and more test cases that we can run regression.
I agree. I agree. The question is, how do we enforce that? Do we enforce that via just manual review, or is there a way to automate that enforcement?
It's kind of difficult to do it with the manual automation, but we do get it reviews. We don't approve get it reviews if there's no test case associated with it.
Yeah. So that's the question: is we just do with the manual review?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know we some of that has been pushed back on the tech profile stuff, where pushback was, hey, we need some unit tests there, because it's both unit tests as well as, depending on what code you're adding, end-to-end tests that need to be added. And at some point, I want to start reporting on just more the static analysis around test coverage, getting some of that stuff, and understanding coverage. I don't know. Does Robot report kind of code coverage as well for the end-to-end tests?
Code coverage. I think there's other tools that does it better than Robot. Zach, do you have any idea?
Yeah. So it doesn't do code coverage. It's doing is it's doing sort of integration tests. That's what
pass fail. Okay.
There are, if you do want to do code coverage, there are other tools that are for per language specific. If you have questions about that, I can point you.
Yeah, I know the Go tests, which, for the unit test case of Go tests, they can do the code coverage. The question is, I also want to know from the end-to-end test, how much of the code's being exercised in what we'll call real-world test cases, which I think end-to-end integration test is closer to.
Yeah, it would be useful to know if there's tools that can perform that sort of thing. Okay. I'm not aware of any currently, though.
All right, cool.
I think that's really hard to achieve because generally frameworks that do integration tests, they don't know any detail of the code that is tested. They just know about the APIs. The rest is a black box for them.
There are tools that'll do heat map analysis of running code. I've used those for Python before. That'll generate like a flame graph of how often, what parts of the code are being used, but that's mainly for a performance-related metric.
I've done that on Python on the ONU. You can generate that flame graph as he described. You can see exactly how much each part of the code is used.
Because I'd also like to understand or be able to run some of the end-to-end as well as unit tests with some of the deadlock detection stuff that Go provides, some of the concurrency tests that, the runtime tests that Go provide beyond just the coverage, so that we can understand if we're hitting certain deadlock conditions or whatever during end-to-end testing. That makes sense? I'm going to assume it does, because no one answered, or I was completely confused.
No, it does make sense. I think it's a little bit early to say. The question is which part of this piece that we try to tackle first. I think we only have 5 test cases. We should look into how we are going to go ahead and get, at least on the name, some coverage on some of the major features. And then we can start investigating, in my opinion anyways. What's the coverage? Yes, you have a test, but what's the coverage?
Yeah. Anyway, Kailash, this was great. Thank you very much for this.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any other questions on this? All right. I'm going to close the meeting then. Give you guys 9 minutes back. Thanks for everything, guys, and see you on the chat.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.